C399, the magic. It reportedly traveled 15 inches through flesh, shattered 2 bones, and yet official findings state it weighed 6 grains, less than 2 grains shy of factory spec. This artifact, the centerpiece of the most scrutinized crime in American history, should be a mangled piece of lead and copper. Instead, it appears almost pristine. This defies the fundamental laws of terminal ballistics, but today, we test if physics is truly a conspiracy. The enduring skepticism surrounding the assassination of John F. Kennedy is perhaps best encapsulated not by hidden shooters, but by a single, near-perfectly preserved 5x52mm Carcano round. When Joe Rogan posted his blunt assessment of the evidence, that the recovered bullet never hit a goddamn thing, he articulated the core doubt held by millions. A full metal jacketed FMJ projectile, especially one utilizing a relatively soft lead core and a copper alloy jacket common in 1960s surplus ammunition, is engineered for penetration, yes, but not immunity to deformation. Any significant encounter with high-density materials like vertebrae or ribs, which the magic bullet supposedly struck and damaged, should have resulted in catastrophic energy transfer and a visible, irreversible change in the projectile's profile. To address this challenge, we needed to go beyond diagrams and hypotheticals. We sourced the alleged murder weapon, a 5mm Manley Kerr Carcano Model 38 bolt-action rifle, allegedly used by Lee Harvey Oswald. The specific ammunition we are testing is a modern equivalent of the full metal jacket 5.52mm round, specifically the PPU FMJ load, offering a consistent comparison point with the original Western Cartridge Company 160-grain round utilized in 1963. The challenge is clear. Can a 5mm FMJ round pass through significant ballistic resistance and retain structural integrity comparable to CE-399? Our first experiment is to establish a baseline for minimum deformation. What is the absolute softest medium that can capture a bullet intact without destroying the evidence? The answer is water. Water, due to its non-compressible nature and high density, acts as a highly effective ballistic brake, decelerating a projectile through immense hydraulic pressure. This allows the round to be slowed without the violent, crushing forces associated with striking solid targets. We arranged multiple water cooler jugs in sequence. The goal was to harness the principle of deceleration. The first jug initiates hydrostatic shock and drag. Subsequent jugs absorb the remaining kinetic energy. 15mm Carcano round typically leaves the muzzle at velocities exceeding 2,000 feet per second, FPS. To capture this 139-grain projectile requires dissipating over 1,200 feet Libleys of energy. The initial shot proves telling. The 5mm Carcano slices through the first 3 jugs and comes to rest perfectly inside the 4th. Upon retrieval, the results are immediate. Even this minimal impact test shows significant visible marking. The base of the jacket exhibits clear stress marks, and minute divots are present along the copper shell. Most critically, the round appears to have keyholed or entered the final medium sideways, indicating that even after passing through thin plastic and water, the projectile's stability was compromised, causing it to yaw. This preserved bullet, having encountered only water, is already more visibly deformed and stressed than the famous CE-399. If water alone can cause this much stress, what happens when bone is introduced? This brings us to the core of the test, replicating impact with biological tissue. While the magic bullet scenario, a precise, complex trajectory hitting multiple points, is nearly impossible to reproduce perfectly in a controlled environment, we can accurately replicate the impact dynamic of a 5mm FMJ striking a human skull. We utilize specialized ballistic dummy material, engineered to mimic the density and fracturing behavior of human bone and soft tissue, followed again by a bank of water jugs for post-impact capture. The fatal shot fired by Oswald struck the president in the head, causing massive fragmentation. Our aim is to simulate this impact and analyze the state of the non-fragmented portion of the projectile, if any remains, after penetrating the skull. The ballistic dummy head is positioned to mimic the entry angle described in the autopsy reports, a shot entering the posterior skull region. The first shot is violent. The muzzle report of the Carcano is immediately followed by a dull, wet thud and the catastrophic destruction of the dummy head. The skull fractures exactly where predicted, mimicking the diagrams. However, the subsequent trajectory is wildly unpredictable. The bullet fragments upon striking the inner bone structure and soft tissue analog. The projectile, now destabilized and tumbling, exits the front of the head and immediately veers right, completely missing the designated capture tanks. We observe severe keyholing on the exit path, confirming that once a 5mm FMJ encounters dense bone, its stability is gone. It tumbles, fragments, and its path becomes ballistic chaos. This initial failure emphasizes the difficulty of obtaining intact projectiles after bone impact. We need to successfully slow the projectile immediately after it exits the skull analog. We recalibrate the setup, reinforcing the water tanks and adjusting the trajectory slightly. The Carcano is fired again. Attempt 2 yields similar chaos. The head is destroyed, and the residual energy causes the bullet remnants to strike the water tanks at an extreme angle, again resulting in loss or severe fragmentation beyond recognition. For the third and final attempt, we utilize a fresh dummy head and an optimized capture system, banking even more on the rapid deceleration provided by the water. We need that perfect moment where the round has expended energy fragmenting the bone, but still retains enough mass to be caught cleanly before it deviates too far. The third shot is a dead-on hit. The 5mm round enters the fresh skull, fragments the bone structure, and then exits, traveling directly into the first water jug. The jug is ripped apart, but the next 2 jugs successfully dissipate the energy. We have successfully retrieved the bullet that passed through the simulated cranium. The moment of truth arrives during the comparison. We have 2 data points: bullet A, which only traveled through water and plastic, and bullet B, which passed through a skull analog and bone fragments before hitting water. We compare these to the official photographic evidence of CE 399. Bullet B, having passed through the skull, is visibly deformed. The base is severely squeezed, and while the copper jacket remains largely intact, a testament to the FMJ design, the overall symmetry is compromised. It displays a distinct lateral bend, consistent with the sudden, non-uniform resistance encountered when passing through fractured bone structures. This projectile, though still recognizable, has sacrificed significant structural integrity. Crucially, when comparing bullet B, the skull impact, to bullet A, the water-only impact, bullet B is demonstrably more distorted. Yet here is the paradox. Bullet B is still more severely damaged than the infamous CE 399. This suggests that for the single bullet theory to hold true, the 5mm Carcano round, which is known for a slight design flaw allowing the core to shift and the round to yaw quickly, would have had to travel through Governor Connolly's wristbone, a dense, compact target, and his rib with minimal resistance. While ballistics is not an exact science, and factors like slight variations in jacket hardness, core composition, and impact velocity can alter results, the level of preservation seen in CE 399, compared to the damage inflicted by our simulation on bone, remains extremely difficult to justify. The Carcano round proved itself capable of surviving contact, maintaining a substantial amount of mass, and not fragmenting entirely, a factor often overlooked. However, the degree of deformation witnessed in our tests, even in the best-case capture scenario post-skull penetration, significantly outweighs the minor deformations reported on CE 399. Joe Rogan's skepticism, based on the visual evidence alone, is powerfully supported by the physics of terminal ballistics. For CE 399 to exist in its recovered state, the bones it struck would have had to be vastly weaker than standard human anatomy, or the bullet hit them obliquely, skimming rather than penetrating fully. The 5mm Carcano is a historically underestimated round, but our data confirms that when faced with high-density materials, it behaves like any jacketed rifle projectile. It deforms, yaws, and loses stability rapidly. The magic of CE399 appears to be less a product of its metallurgy and more a profound statistical anomaly. We focus today on the terminal effects of the Carcano at close range, replicating the physics of impact. But the real riddle isn't the entry wound, it's the exit trajectory. The single bullet theory hinges not just on the bullet's integrity, but on its capacity to maintain trajectory and velocity across a massive 100-yard distance and complex parabolic path. Next time, we are stepping back. We are pushing the range out to 100 yards to test the controversial physics of the single bullet theory trajectory itself. You won't believe what happens when we fully account for atmospheric drag, elevation, and the notorious tendency of the 5mm Carcano projectile to initiate significant yaw downrange. If the bullet survived the flesh, could the shot itself have survived the physics? Click here and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about Dealey Plaza.